right, so today we're going into part 2 of Peace in a World Not His. Peace in a World Not His. Now in part 1, I'm just going to kind of do a little recap here. In part 1, we were really concerned with understanding this idea of shalom or peace. You know, we're told in John 14:27, peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. So that's Yeshua's admonition to us, that he's going to give us peace. But he's not going to give it as the world gives it. So how do we get this peace? What prevents us from having it? And what can cause us to lose our shalom, lose our peace, is the main point of the teaching. We started off, for context, by recognizing that from John 14, verse 1, all the way to the end of John 17, pretty much, is one thought, dealing with these issues. Because John 14:1 says, let your heart not be troubled. John 14:6, Yeshua says that I am the way and the truth and the life. So he's the way to having your heart not be troubled. John 14:16, we know that he said he would ask the Father to send a helper to stay with us forever, so that we could have help in this process. John 14:27, I already quoted, where he says, my peace I give to you. And then in John 15, which we're going to cover today, he tells us to stay in him. He tells us that we're not of the world, but we are to be in the world. In John 16:1, he says that these words which he had spoken, and I think it's primarily talking about all the way back through John 14, so that we do not stumble. John 16:33, the words I've spoken to you, that in me you might have peace. So this is all about the same idea all the way through. And then, of course, in John 17:15, he says, I do not pray that you should take them out of the world, but that you would keep them safe while in the world. Okay, so let's go ahead now and read John 15. We read John 14 last time, and so we're going to continue here and read chapter 15 and start heading to eventually through chapter 17. And then when we're finished with reading these chapters, if I don't feel like I've made my point clear enough at that point, we'll go through dealing with worry and anxiety and all these other verses that I have, so we can keep doing this, and I'll keep doing this until we come out of lockdown. How's that? Okay? Somebody's going to be watching this in the future going, what lockdown? The coronavirus pandemic of 2020. Okay. John 15 and verse 1. I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. And every branch in me that bears no fruit, he takes away, and every branch that bears fruit, he prunes, so that it bears more fruit. So let's stop right there. He says, I am the true vine. Guess what that means? There are false vines. So be aware. There's no reason for him to tell you he's the true vine unless there are false ones. So what he's trying to tell you is that fruit, if we're going to kind of work our way in, right? So the fruit is at the end of the vine, at the end of the branches. The fruit is the end product. And then you work your way back, and the fruit is being fed through the vine, through the roots, through the ground. And so he's saying, look, I am the vine. He says, if you don't bear fruit, then you're not feeding off of the right vine, because then you're not going to produce the right fruit. And he says, and my Father is the gardener. Okay, so can we agree that the gardener has a lot more authority than the vine? The gardener gets to do whatever he wants to the vine. And apparently in verse 2, he's going to be doing some pruning. So he says here, every branch in me, if you're a branch in me, I'm the vine, I'm the root system, I'm the whole main, by the way, you see this in Romans 11, right? The grafting into the olive tree. He says, I am what you need to be in. I am the source. And if you are in me, if you're sourcing through me, then you need to bear fruit. He says, every branch that is in me that does not bear fruit is taken away. And every branch that bears fruit, he prunes so that it bears more fruit. So if you ever did any gardening, you know that there's a concept of pruning that actually ends up helping the plant to grow and to expand and bear more fruit. But what is pruning, though? Pruning is cutting away. We're taught this with the idea of circumcision. It's a cutting away. We're told to cut away the foreskins of our hearts that's cutting away. It's a pruning that's going on. So he's saying is, while you are being fed by me and you're in me and you're growing, you're not going to just be pure and perfect. You're going to have stuff that needs to be pruned or cut away so that you can bear more fruit. So don't think that you've arrived, in other words. Because if you arrived, then why would you need any pruning? Because if you've arrived, then you bear all the fruit that you need to bear. He said, but if you're bearing fruit, now who's going to do the pruning? The Father. Just recognize that. Now the Father may, through Yeshua, then utilize anointed appointed to do that, because that's how they work in the fleshly realm that we call the world below, the earthly realm. But he says, every branch in me that bears no fruit he takes away, and every branch that bears fruit he prunes, so that he bears more fruit. You are already clean because of the word which I have spoken to you. Now, this is an interesting little verse to kind of sneak right in the middle there. He says, well, you are already clean. What does he mean by clean? See, Christians don't understand tameh and tahor. Hopefully you do. So they think clean means I've already been forgiven of sin, I'm pure, I'm good, I've arrived, I'm in, I'm saved, whatever terms you want to throw in there, I'm clean. No, he's saying you are in a state of tahor. You are already tahor. By the way, people that are tahor meaning clean, tameh meaning unclean, can you do things to become tameh? All the time. There's lots of things you can come in contact with or do or whatever that would make you considered unclean. He said, but you are already clean. In other words, he's saying you are in me. If you're in me, you are tahor. However, he says, stay in me in verse 4. So notice he said, I'm the vine, my Father's the gardener, bearing fruit. If you don't bear fruit, that's good. If you bear fruit that's no good, he's going to take it away. If you do bear fruit, he'll prune so you can bear more fruit. He says, so you're in me is what he's saying. He says, you guys are in me, you are clean. If you're not clean, you can't be in him. That's kind of the protocols of the temple as well. That's the tameh tahor protocols. But now he's giving the way this process works. And this is for the once saved, always saved crowd. John 15 is really problematic. And I did have a conversation, I've mentioned it many times before, with a senior Baptist pastor where I read him John 15. I read him these exact verses, handed him the scripture I just read and say, can you please explain to me how that actually works for a once saved, always saved person? And let's read so we know what we're talking about. He says, stay in me and I stay in you. Why would anybody tell you to stay unless you could leave? And he doesn't just say it once, he's going to say it a bunch of times. Stay in me. Look, when I have my children and they were little, and I would tell them, stay there. Why did I have to say that? And more than once, I can promise you. Stay, stay, stay. No, stay. Don't move. Works the same way with puppies. Stay. Doesn't work with cats at all. They ignore everything you say. But why would you need to say that? Because if you didn't say it, they're not going to do it. Because they can move. And so he's saying here, look, stay in me and I in you. As a branch is unable to bear fruit of itself, unless it stays in the vine, so neither you unless you stay in me. So what he's saying here, and I don't think people have ever really, I've not said it this way probably, so I don't know if you've heard it from other people. He says, as the branch is unable to bear fruit of itself. In other words, when you are self-sovereign, you're not staying in him. Because then you're trying to bear fruit of yourself. Okay, I don't think I've ever really emphasized that part of the verse before. He says, stay in me and I in you, as a branch is unable. For all of you out there, you are not able to bear fruit of yourself unless it stays in the vine, so neither you are unless you stay in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Do you notice how just like with children you have to say, I'm the father, you are the child. Or the mother says, right, I'm the mother, you're the child, don't argue with me. It's still here in the scripture the same thing. Let's not forget your place. He says, I'm the vine, you are not. You're a branch of the vine. I'm the vine. Okay? Yeshua wants to always be clear. So he who stays in me and I in him, he bears much fruit. because without me you are able to do nothing. Well, in John 14:6, just previously he said, I am everything. He said, I'm truth, I'm the way, I'm life. What else is there that you're not covering those three things? Without me, you can't do anything. And by the way, not that you can't do anything, you could do all kinds of dumb things. He says you can't do anything that bears the good fruit. That's the context here. Without me, you cannot bear good fruit. If anyone does not stay in me, he is thrown away as a branch that dries up, and they gather them and throw them into the fire, and they are burned. See, this is where I had to ask the Baptist pastor, okay, so wait. Those are people who were in him. By standard terms, that would be a saved person. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about and how I see it, go listen to the teaching, Are You Saved? All right? But he says, if anyone does not stay, he doesn't say if they don't start or they don't come to me. He says, if they don't stay in me, he's thrown away as a branch that is dried up. Now, think about it. If you've ever made a fire, the best stuff to burn, especially at the beginning of a fire, is that really dry, tiny little pieces of a branch. And how fast do they burn? Real fast. All right? And they're thrown away, and they gather them and throw them into the fire, and they are burned. And if the fire is already going, they burn really fast. Just drop them in and pretty much gone. So let's understand that. He says, look, this is only referring to somebody who was in him and now has chosen not to stay in him by being self-sovereign in some way. And by self-sovereign, you could also always choose in your self-sovereignty to leave him and then come under a different authority. But you still, in your self-sovereignty, chose to move. Chose to give authority on to someone else other than him. He says, if you stay in me, verse 7, and now we're going to be much more clear, and my words stay in you. And my words stay in you, you shall ask whatever you wish, and it shall be done for you. Now, bear in mind, this doesn't mean you can just rub the magic lamp and have the genie called Yeshua come out and do whatever you want. He says, if you stay in me and my words stay in you, well, if that's the case, you understand the roles correctly, and you're not going to think any thought of abusing, taking advantage, or whatever misuse of this idea is. And you would understand that, no, he doesn't have to do anything you want. It's because you're doing everything he wants that he will give you what you need to do what he wants. If you stay in me and my words stay in you, you shall ask whatever you wish, and whatever you wish you'll ask it in alignment with his words and him. So of course he'd be happy to give it to you. And it shall be done for you. In this my Father is esteemed, that you bear much fruit, and you shall be my taught ones. Now bear in mind, let's get the context here so we're very clear. He is not talking directly to me or you or anybody listening right now. The audience here are the 12. He's speaking to them. So does this apply to us? In some ways, I'm sure it can apply to us, but not really. In other words, he is specifically talking to them. So when you have that context, he says, look, if you stay in me, my words stay in you, and you ask these things, he says, then you will bear much fruit, and you shall be my taught ones. So we can also come into that category if we go through the same process. If we stay in him, if his words stay in us, and we're actually instructed by him. And by the way, if you're instructed by him, then you're not going to do foolish things and ask foolish things. And that's why he has no problem saying, whatever you wish, it shall be done. Because you're going to wish correctly. You're going to desire things correctly. So this is about these taught ones and anyone who would want to become one of his students, one of his taught ones. Disciples is the right word there. Talmudim. Verse 9. As the Father has loved me, I have also loved you. Stay in my love. Now, as the Father has loved me. So, what do we know about the Father's love for the Son? We know that the Father has loved the Son. The Son says this by always giving him the instruction and guidance he needs. And the Son expresses that appreciation for that love and love back by obedience. So he's saying, as the Father has loved me, providing all my needs and expecting obedience, I have loved you, providing all of your needs and expecting obedience. And that's the way it kind of goes all the way down. If you're a parent, that's the way you should be treating your children, providing all of their needs and expecting obedience. Of course, a lot of us have not been trustworthy in that role. We've not provided all of their needs, so they can't trust you. A lot of you have breached trust with your children. That's a problem. So he says, as the Father has loved me and I also loved you, stay in my love. Now remember, he said earlier in verse 15 of chapter 14, if you love me, you shall guard my commands. So it's the connection between love and commandment keeping. If you guard my commands, verse 10, so he's going to say it again, you shall stay in my love. That's how you do it. So people will read verse 9. If they don't read verse 10, they're going to miss the whole point. As the Father has loved me, I have also loved you. Stay in my love. And then you can get into this love, love, love. Oh, we just, we'll read verse 10. If you guard my commands, this is what it looks like. If you guard my commands, you shall stay in my love, even as I have guarded my Father's commands and stay in his love. If you can still go back and find it, you can listen to Love in Torah. I need to redo that one, but that's one where it goes into all of this. Almost everywhere love is talked about, so is commandment keeping. They are totally interlocked and intertwined and related. You cannot separate the one from the other in terms of the vertical. Okay? You really can't do it in terms of the horizontal either. If you don't understand the commandments about how we treat each other, then you really aren't going to express love properly, one unto another. He says, if you guard my commands, you shall stay in my love, even as I guarded my Father's commands and stay in his love. These words I've spoken to you. Now, by the way, verse 10 is a discipleship language. He says, I've done this, and now I've done, because that's how I treated my Father. So I've now taught you the same as he taught me. So now you do the same with me, and then you'll teach others to do the same with you. It's not that the Father's instructions were different than the Son's instructions, and that's kind of where Christianity goes with this. Well, we just have to do what the Messiah said. Well, yes, but the Messiah only said everything the Father said. He didn't come and give different instruction. If you understand discipleship, you understand complete, congruent duplication. That's what discipleship is. The Father says, I am the express image of my Father. You see him when you see me. If you see me, you've seen the Father, because I act like him, I sound like him, I believe like him. And so he says, if you do that, now you don't get to hear the Father, you get to hear me. So if you imitate me, Paul says, imitate me as I imitate Yeshua. Yeshua says, do what I do because I imitate the Father. It's the chain of flow in the vertical. If you guard my commands, you shall stay in my love, even as I guarded my Father's commands, stay in his love. These words, this is important now. These words I've spoken to you so that your joy can be done away with and that your joy might be done, well, it doesn't work that way. See that word complete there? It says, these words I've spoken to you so that your joy might be, my joy might be in you and that your joy might be complete. Same Greek words as in Matthew where it says, I didn't come to destroy but to complete or fulfill. You want to use equal weights and equal measures. If you're going to say that word means to do away with, then forget about joy. It's over. It's done away with. No joy. Knock it off. Some of you are being joyful right now. Stop it. Okay? Verse 11 is clear. He says, I've spoken these things so that my joy, what is his joy? His joy is to do the Father's will. His pleasure is to do the Father's pleasure. And he says, I do this so that you can imitate me, so that my joy can be in you, and that you would have completeness of overflowing of joy. So complete or fulfill means to fill up to the fullness of the intention of what it was designed to be. Not to do away with it, but that you can experience the fullness of it. And actually in Matthew, we know this very clearly because he goes into an explanation of murder or killing and adultery in a more full way. So you have a more full understanding of those commandments. Well, he's also saying, I want you to have a more full joy. Verse 12. This is my command, that you love one another as I have loved you. Now remember, we're going through the chain here. I was loved by the Father a certain way, and then I've loved you as my Father loved me, and I want you to love each other as I have loved you. And so the chain keeps going down from the vertical. And remember, he connected that to what? Guarding of commands. So therefore, it would be appropriate to say, if you love me, I'm saying this actually from myself. If your teacher is saying, if you love me, then you'll guard my commands. Because you should know that those commands, if they are in the vertical, are aligned with Yeshua's commands, with the Father's commands, etc. Which is why Paul was able to say, imitate me as I imitate Yeshua. Okay? He wants us to be able to use the same language down the line. That's in line with Deuteronomy 17, by the way, where you're told it's arrogance not to follow the guidance of the anointed appointed. However, you got to know who's anointed and appointed and who's just in a political position. That was a problem in Yeshua's day. Okay, Caiaphas and the rest of the crew over there at the temple were political appointees. They had an in. They were not the legitimate leadership. Look for discipled leadership, right? You should see Yeshua. Here, you know what, maybe you can't see because who knows how Yeshua physically acted, but you should hear Yeshua coming out of the mouth of your teacher. That's the thing. Can you hear the Father and the Son coming through the mouth of your teacher? He says, this I command you, that you love one another as I have loved you, in the same manner as I have loved you. No one has greater love than this, that he should lay down his life for his friends. You are my friends if you do whatever I command you. Okay, so he's expecting the imitation process to go down the chain. Remember, this is like his last message to them before they kill him. This chapters that we're reading, 14, 15, 16, 17, this is his last messages to him. And 17 really is a prayer to the Father on behalf of them. And so he's saying, look, I got to give you the fullest basic understanding of this, which is it's about discipleship. And we know this because at the end of Matthew, that's what he sends them out to do, to disciple. And so now he's saying, if you're going to be my students, if my love is going to stay in you, if you're going to do the things that I'm instructing, if you're going to be my students and imitate me, then you have to also be friends to each other, which means you have to be willing to lay down your life for other people. Anybody want this job? Anybody want to be a discipler? Well, then you have to be willing to lay down your life for people. You have to make your life a living sacrifice. You have to be willing to put, remember what I said many weeks ago? Maybe I didn't say it in the teaching, I'm not sure. But one of our roles is to inconvenience ourselves to the benefit of other people. I'm not talking about enabling and codependenting. I'm saying that when someone else has need and you can provide that need, but it's not convenient to you, but you do it anyway, that's laying down your life for them. Because your life wants to do ABC. They have a different need. You would need to put your life on hold to meet their need. That's the vertical. This is not talking about just the idea of being willing to take a bullet for somebody or to die for somebody. See, that's the way it's taught often. No, are you willing to lay down your life, your desires, your interests for somebody else? That's tough stuff. Because we are very self-possessed, selfish people. Human beings are very self-centered, self-possessed, and only really care about themselves and what they want and what they're doing. How do I know that? I'll give you an example. When we have a Facebook group. It's an MTOI Facebook group. It says very clearly at the top of the page that nobody is supposed to answer anybody's questions except the leadership. But yet people in their self-centered, self-positioned, self-everything still jump in there thinking they need to answer people. instead of laying down that yearning and urge to go ahead and participate when they're not supposed to. But. They still do it. It amazed me that when I was managing it, Manny's managing it now, but when I was managing the page in the beginning, I would look at posts because they had to be approved. I would go to approve one that I knew I would answer, and I would click approved, and before I could finish formulating the thought in my head to start typing it in, somebody else had already posted an answer to the question. And I was like, are you kidding me? I was like, really? It was unbelievable. And then the person got offended when I deleted their response and said, go back up to the pinned post. People are asking questions in this group wanting to know what I have to say, or the leadership here. There are lots of groups that they'll say, well, you just want to control everything. Yes, in this place. Not everywhere. You want to share your opinion? There's 5 million places to share your opinion. People who are in this group want to know what this group's position is on things. You don't represent this group. You don't get, unless you do, let me rephrase that, unless you represent the group, you don't get the right. Because people will think you represent the group. So only people with authority from me get to do that. See, but we're way too selfish for that. Well, that's wrong. Everybody should be able to. No, it's not wrong. It's correct and it's vertical. And you need to just get over your pride and ego that you need to just do whatever you want all the time. There are more don'ts than do's in your scripture. Get over it. There are more things he tells you you can't do than what he tells you to do. If you go by the 613 commandments, the way others have put it together, well, they come up with 248 do's, but 365 don'ts. That's a lot more don'ts. It's over 100 more don'ts. So you don't like hearing the word no. You don't like someone telling you you can't. I never said you can't anywhere. I said you just can't do it here. Some of you have this problem in your houses. You've got older children that are adults doing things you don't want them doing in your house. Well, why did you let them do that? They argue with me. What do you mean they argue with you? Show them the door. It's your house. You can go do that all you want in your own house. Go to your own house and do what you want. You just can't do that in my house. Well, I don't think that's fair. Well, it doesn't matter what you think. It's not your house. By the way, that's not ego or pride. That's the vertical. The Father does not care one thing what you have an opinion on about what he's doing. Neither does the Son, by the way. They do not need your help or your guidance or your advice as to what's the right way to do it. But you think that your opinion counts. Not in the vertical like that, it doesn't. Your opinion counts when somebody actually wants it. Any of you ever tried to give an opinion when it wasn't wanted? And please, don't lie to me. It never went well. Be honest. Giving opinions when unsolicited never goes well. You need to make sure that somebody wants an opinion. Okay? So here he's talking about disciples. He's saying, are you, if you're going to be, loving one another? He says, look, this is my command, that you love one another. And how? He wants you to lay down your life for your friends. Now, he didn't say for everybody, because I got people that are all mad at me because they're not even a part of the congregation, not really part of the ministry, found me on YouTube, and because I don't give them everything that they want and lay down my life for them, they're all mad. Well, I've emailed you 4 times and you've never answered it. Okay. I don't remember a job description saying I have to answer everybody's emails. Is there any verse that says I have to answer people's emails? Is there any verse that says I got to take your phone calls? I do both, by the way, as best I can. There aren't any verses that say all that I got to take everybody's emails and so, but do I get angry people saying, well, I forget this ministry. You guys are just like all the other blah, 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 blah. You don't answer anything. Sorry. Get 500 a day. I can't always see yours. Okay? Well, how have you missed mine? I've sent you 4 of them in the last year. I've missed, you have no idea how many I've missed in the last year. Look, when I used to have my phone, I used to do this on the screen. I used to have the email on my phone with 20,000 unanswered or unread emails because I get that many a day. I'll trade with you. You think you could do a better job? I'll trade with you. But by the way, if you trade with me, you have to do all the other things I do that impose on my ability to answer emails. Because you're thinking, oh, I could do it. I've got lots of free time. Yeah, but you have to do all the other things I do too. And then see if you have time to answer emails. But you do lay down your life. So bear in mind, the other things that I'm doing is already handling phone calls and emails and other things. I can't be answering everybody's everything. Ask the staff, they will tell you that I'm available as 24/7 as I can be. There are people that call me 1 o'clock in the morning and talk to me from other countries. There are people that, whatever. I mean, I'm on and available and lay down my life. You need to understand that's what he's asking people to do. But you also have to recognize that there's only one person that you're dealing with. If you're dealing with one person, there's only so much they can do. And so that's the important thing. He says, look, he says, you are my friends if you do whatever I command. So now he's defining what friends are. So he wants you to lay down your life for friends. He's explaining what friends are. Friends are those that are going to do whatever he commands. Sounds like the covenant again, doesn't it? In other words, friends are covenanted people. That's his definition here in the conversation. That's not like saying you can't use the world's definition of friends and have other people. It's saying in the context of what he's talking about, he's using friends for covenanted people. He's not saying you can't be friends with anybody else, but just in the purpose of this conversation, he's making it covenanted people because we know Yeshua is the one that gave the covenant in Exodus 19. So when he says, no one has greater love than this, than to lay down his life for his friends, and you are friends, you are my friends if you do whatever I command you, if you're covenanted. No longer do I call you servants, for a servant does not know what his master is doing, but I have called you my friends. For all which I have heard from my Father, I have made known to you. What is he continuing to do here? It's all the vertical discipling language. He says, this is the way it goes. I have made known to you all that my Father has taught me. I can honestly say that my effort for the 1,400 videos, whatever on YouTube, etc., is to make known to you all that the Father and Son has made known to me. That's all I try to do. He says, you did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you that you should go and bear fruit. This is true of the disciples. It's also true of all. He says, no one comes to the Father unless the Son reveals, and no one comes to the Son unless the Father draws. The Son reveals the Father, and the Father draws, to the Son. He says, you did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you that you should go and bear fruit. So what is the appointed? We talk about anointed, appointed. Anointed, appointed is not you get to be in charge. No, it means that you're expected to bear fruit. And that fruit has to do with laying down your life. That fruit has to do with making known what the Father has made known to you. Now, you don't get to just run around and go say, well, I'm going to go and make known what the Father's made to me. You have to actually be anointed and appointed, and that goes to the vertical. It goes to discipleship. Remember, this is the discipling language. So if you are discipled, then your job is to go and make known what your teacher has made known through the Father, through the Son, all the way down the chain to you. Again, you did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you that you should go and bear fruit, and that your fruit should remain, so that whatever you ask the Father in my authority, he might give you. Notice the whole thing. The Father is being asked by who? Anointed, appointed, chosen people who are having the words stay in them. Covenanted people, they are asking the Father for stuff. And so this is so that whatever you ask. So you're not going to get whatever you ask just because you ask. If you're discipled, if you're anointed, if you're appointed, if you're chosen, if the word stay in you and you stay in him, etc., then you have these things. Look, in verse 12 of chapter 14, it says, truly, truly, I say to you, he who believes in me, the works that I do, he shall do also, which is Torah observance. And greater works than these shall he do, because I go to the Father. And then he says, and whatever you ask in my authority, I'll do, in order that the Father might be esteemed in the Son. This is consistent now in chapter 15 from what he said in 14. So some of you don't like that I repeat myself. Don't get mad at me. Yeshua is repeating himself right here in 2 chapters, many times, over and over. Why does he do this? Because we're hard-headed. We are dense. It's got a beat on us. Same thing you do to a child, right? You have to say the same thing. Come here, come here, come here, come here, come here, come here. Stop it, stop it, stop it, stop it. I mean, one stop it isn't going to work. Put that down. Put it down. Put that down. It's not going to work, right? One time is put it down, and you're not going to walk away. You're going to think it's going to work. Actually, even 5 or 10 times doesn't work. Sometimes you have to walk over, grab it, and put it down. Said, I told you, put it down. That's how bad we are. We're like little children. All right. So he says, the expectation is that you would be chosen and appointed so that you bear fruit. What kind of fruit? The fruit being talked about in verse 2. Every branch of me that bears no fruit he takes away, but every one that bears fruit he prunes, so that he bears more fruit. What fruit? The fruit of following the discipling process, doing what the Father says to do. This is the fruit. And then you can consider that whatever you ask the Father might be given to you. All right? Now, verse 17, these words I command you so that you love one another. So all of this is so that you love one another. Remember, he defines what that is earlier. This is my command that you love one another as I loved you, laying down the life, etc., etc. He says, I expect you to love in the same way as the Father loved me and I love the Father. This is obedience, belief obedience, we'll call it. I like that sort of phrase, belief obedience. He says, these words I've commanded you so that you love one another. If the world hates you, you know that it hated me before it hated you. Now, remember, he's not saying if the world hates you in general. He's saying if through all of this you are becoming like me, of course, he's saying, look, if the world hates you, understand it hates you because you look like me now. You act like me, you sound like me, you think like me. Let this mind be in you, Philippians 2:5, that was in Messiah Yeshua. You look like me, you sound like me. Of course it's going to hate you. It hated me. He says, if you were of the world would love its own. And you all know that. Sure, when you were palling around with the world, everybody liked you. Everything was great. But as soon as you decided to sound like Yeshua, all you know what broke loose. If you are of the world would love its own. But because you are not of the world, but I chose you out of the world, for that reason the world hates you. Now remember, we talked about this in other teachings. I don't want to get all Kabbalistic on you, but the idea of that which is of the above and that which is of the below. We live in the below, but we're becoming not of the below. We're thinking like the above. We're acting like the above. We're becoming like those things that are above. That's the instruction that the Father gives, how to become like him. He's not in the below, he's in the above. So we call that in the heavens or on the earth. We call it in the world or the flesh versus in the heavenly type of the mindset. Think of it from that point of view. He said, look, just because you happen to live in the below doesn't mean that you're of it. Yeshua wasn't of it, but he was here. He wasn't of this world, but he lived in it. He says, if you were of the world would love its own, but because you are not of the world, so we were of the world when they were loving us, but now because of being baptized and covenanting and burying the old man and coming out in newness of life and all the things that we did and making those declarations when we got mikvah, etc., we have chosen to not be of the world. We have disconnected ourselves and changed to an above citizenship, a citizenship with the things above. The kingdom of Elohim is from above. It's not the kingdoms of this world. The kingdom of Elohim is not of this world. Now, when Yeshua shows up, then both will be together under one authority, the kingdoms of above and the kingdoms of below. That's the tremendous event that we're looking forward to, the joining together of those kingdoms. So he says, but because you are not of the world, but I chose you out of the world. So in his calling you, that brought you out of the world's thinking, the world's mindset, the world's belief systems, all of the worldly things. For that reason, the world hates you. Remember, now actually, give me a second. I'm just going to read you something. Seems like every week I find reasons to end up in Ephesians 2. But you know, in Ephesians 2, it talks about how, remember that you were once in the world. He says Gentiles in the flesh, but essentially you were once in the world. And you were called uncircumcision by that which is circumcision. In other words, you were called uncovenanted by those who were covenanted. And that at that time, when you were in the world, you were what? Without Messiah, excluded from citizenship of Israel, strangers from the covenants of promise, and had no expectation, and were without Elohim in the world. That's what he's talking about here, and Paul was reiterating it here in Ephesians, but that's what Yeshua was talking about in John 15. You were with all of that. You were Gentiles, you were worldly, you were not covenanted, you had no expectation, no promises for you, without Elohim, and I called you out of that. Just like being slaves in Egypt, right? This is the time of year we're looking at Passover. He called them and pulled them out of the world of slavery in Egypt and brought them to Sinai to covenant. But remember, at the time that you were in the world, you were without Elohim, without Messiah, without promise, without hope, without anything. Excluded. You were excluded from, not just didn't have it because you didn't know about it, you were actually excluded from it. Go back to John 15. He says, if you are of the world, verse 19, the world would love its own, but because you are not of the world, but I chose you out of the world, for that reason the world hates you. Remember the word that I said to you, a servant is not greater than his master. So now, we normally like to think about a servant and master thing as in terms of the vertical, which is true. But he's also trying to say, look, if they did it to the master, then don't think they won't do it to you also. Don't think, a lot of people think, oh, this is a Christian mindset actually. We're servants, so we don't have to do the law. The master did all the law for us. No, that would make the servant greater than the master. If the master had to do it, why don't you have to do it? He says, servant is not greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they'll persecute you too. If they have guarded my word, they would have guarded yours too. That also goes to the vertical relationship. If you are a servant and you're under an anointed appointed, you need to guard the word from that anointed appointed. As you guard Messiah, as you guard the Father, as you guard, not God, as you guard the Father, his words. He said, but all this they shall do to you because of my name, my authority, because they do not know him who sent me. So remember, this all goes back up the vertical. He says they're not doing it just because they don't know you and they don't know me. It's because they don't know the one who's at the top. And by know, it's not that almost every nation has something they call God, but they don't have a relationship with the true Elohim of the universe. They don't have a relationship with the Creator correctly. And it's that knowing relational thing that he's talking about here. But all of this they shall do to you because of my authority, because they do not understand and have a relationship with him who sent me. So it's when you choose to come under his authority that the world starts to hate you. Haven't you noticed that? It's your choice to go from Sunday to Shabbat to Saturday. Your choice to eat differently. Your choice to keep different holy days. That's because you came under a different authority. That causes the problem. You, because of his authority, and because you do know who sent him, end up at odds with those who don't understand his authority and don't know really who sent him. They don't have that relationship. So they can't understand what you're doing and why you're doing it or why you stopped doing what you used to do. That's more the confusion. Why did you stop doing what you used to do? And why would you come under that burdensome law? You know, that's the law of freedom, according to James. The perfect Torah of freedom. Why would he call it the Torah of freedom? How about just for the simplicity that it's what he gave them when they were set free from Egypt? It frees them from the bondage of sin because now they know how to do things right instead of just always doing things wrong or randomly, occasionally doing things right. But now we know what is right, so we can do what is right. That's very important. He said, if I had not come and spoken to them, they would have no sin, but now they have no excuse for their sin. Now he's talking specifically here about the ones he spoke to here in his fleshly life, when he had the flesh suit on. Okay? Because he's now talking directly to those disciples. Look, you are going to be hated as I'm hated. They're going to come after you as they came after me. They have no excuse because I did talk to them, the ones I talked to. So this isn't like people have no excuse because they happen to hear a Christian broadcast somewhere or a Jewish broadcast or they read a Bible one day. He was talking about the covenanted people that should know better. Okay, the Jewish community at that time. He said, they have no excuse for their sin. He who hates me hates my Father as well. Take that all the way up the line. If you're dealing with an anointed, appointed person, if you hate them, then you hate the Messiah, then you hate the Father. What happened when Pharaoh said to Moses, if I see you again, I'm going to kill you. The death penalty came on Egypt. That was the next plague. You don't threaten the anointed appointed because it's like threatening the Father himself. You know? A lady was really ranting and raving against me one year. My wife had to go up to her and said, listen, you need to calm down because if my husband is anointed and appointed, you're really bringing some stuff on yourself. And not for my husband either, but, you know, I'm just trying to be your friend here and warn you. You might want to just calm down. And it was over something as dumb as throwing a ball around after services in a building that we didn't have authority to do this in. It wasn't like a halakhic Torah thing. But this was that selfish thing going on. Well, how dare somebody tell me that my children can't throw a ball around in the building? Well, things can get broken. We don't have permission to do that. We're renting this building, blah, 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 blah. So no. But the thing is, how you rail against leadership demonstrates to the Father how you disrespect leadership. That's why I tell all of you out there, when the president does things like, look, some of you don't like Trump. Some of you didn't like Obama, so that's either side of you. Because probably the ones who like Trump didn't like Obama, the ones who liked Obama don't like Trump. Good, so I get everybody in the last two presidents. None of you should be mocking the president. That's a person in authority. You don't have to like him. You don't have to agree with him. But how you treat authority is how you treat authority. Okay? You will do in life what you do in life. I know it sounds way too profound. I used to teach this to people when I taught martial arts. Okay, in the karate class, if you practice always missing the person by an inch, then when you go out there in the real world, it might be a little tough to hit the person because you practiced holding back and missing by an inch. So let's get some equipment on and throw some punches and some kicks full. So you're not practicing missing by an inch. How you practice is how you do. Honor the mother and father, honor mother and father, the fifth commandment, right? Honor mother and father. Guess what? If you didn't learn how to honor mother and father, you don't know how to honor any authorities. You never practiced honoring authority. You probably didn't honor your teachers, probably don't honor your bosses, certainly not your pastors and rabbis, because you never learned to honor authority. Honor, by the way, doesn't mean obey everything they say. It means do it in your treatment of them, do it respectfully. Some of you have parents that are really hard to deal with right now. You're older, they're even older, and they're really driving you crazy. So that doesn't mean you have to do everything they say. After all, you're 50 years old, you got your own kids, maybe your own grandkids. What do you need? They don't have authority like that over you, but you must treat them in a way that is not disrespectful and dishonoring. They're your parents. And if they're going to push you to that point, then you can always say, look, then we can't have a relationship. But you can't treat them in a way that's dishonoring. This is all about that whole vertical thing he's talking about here. And he says, look, if you choose to follow me, just like if you choose to come under a certain teacher, if you come under you're going to have those that are going to mock you and attack you for being under whatever authority you're under. He says, verse 24, if I did not do among them the works which no one else did, they would have no sin. But now that they have both seen and have hated both me and my Father. But that the word might be filled, which was written in their Torah, they hated me without a cause. And he says that not because we should think that was for them and it's not for us. He's saying, look, they really have no excuse. This is in their book. This is in their source. This is what they honor, their Torah, which is the Torah, not just theirs. But he's saying it's written in their book. I tell you to do these things often when you're dealing with family members. And say, well, look, when you want your family members to deal with you a little better, say, and it's in their book. See, it's not really their book, but it's in their book. Tell them to grab out their Bible, look up Philippians 2:12, where it says that everybody walks out their own salvation. You don't walk it out for them. And so that's why I say, so ask them to please be respectful of the fact that whether they agree with you or not in what you're doing, you are simply trying to do Philippians 2:12. But I would say, tell them that it's in their book. Even in your New Testament, in your book, it says these things. Because they may not like my book, my translation, whatever I use. So tell them to look it up in their book. He says, verse 26, and when the Helper comes, which I shall send to you from the Father, the Spirit of the truth, which we already know is him. Okay, he's the truth, the Spirit of truth. We read that last time, chapter 14. Which comes from the Father, shall bear witness of me. Of course it will. He said, I'm not going to leave you orphans. I am coming to you. So through this means by which this helper is going to be that small voice that's telling you what Yeshua wants you to know. When the other voices are being so loud, self-sovereignty, Hasatan, etc. He says, it shall bear witness of me. But you, verse 27, you also bear witness because you have been with me from the beginning. So it's not just the helper, it's also the human disciples, the ones who are trained and anointed and appointed, that are witnesses of him, that are going to give the help that's needed as well. The Ruach is more a personal confirmation that the human instruments are correct. Of course, be careful which spirit you're listening to. I've had many a person say, well, the Spirit told me not to listen to you. The Spirit told me not to listen to that person. I said, well, which spirit? Your spirit, Hasatan's spirit, or the Ruach? You got to be careful. You got a lot of noise going on in that head of yours. And all the voices you're hearing, all those feelings you get, those sort of like gut feelings, every one of those voices is trying to convince you it's the small voice. Every one of them wants to convince you it's the Father's voice or the Son's voice or the Ruach's voice, whatever. Just be careful if it's the voice that's trying to match your preference, if you have one. That's hard, though, to step away from yourself to see if you're biasing your attentiveness to the voice that you're trying to listen to because it's trying to say what you want to hear as opposed to just saying what you need to hear. All right? Let's be really careful with that. Now we'll go to verse 1 of chapter 16. These words I have spoken to you, these words, all of this stuff up to this point, so that you do not stumble. So you do not stumble. That's really, really important because he wants you to understand that it's through discipleship, through vertical alignment, through being a servant vertically into the covenant, through covenanting, that you don't stumble. For understanding what love is and how it's connected to commandment keeping, to really understand what the helper is and how it comes about. Chapter 14:26 says, the helper, the set-apart spirit, which the Father shall send in my authority, it shall teach you all and remind you of all that I have said to you. That's the role of the Ruach, the helper, the set-apart spirit. Very important. Let's see if I squeeze in a little bit more in chapter 16. He says, they shall put you out of the congregations, but an hour is coming when everyone who kills you shall think he is rendering service to Elohim. I bet you a lot of you have a lot of people praying for you in the churches, all your friends and family that are still in the churches. Oh, we need to pray for Rick. Oh, we need to pray for John. We need to pray for Manny. We got to pray for them because they're lost now because they're trying to keep commandments. And this they shall do to you, verse 3, because they did not have a relationship with the Father to me. In other words, they're going to do these things because they don't know. So take this section here. They're going to put you out of the congregations. They're going to try to get you killed, etc., thinking they're doing Elohim's work. This goes back to the same thing where it says, well, whatever you ask in his authority, he's going to do it. Only if you have a right relationship with him and you know what is his desire. You can see that plays out here. They're going to wrongly understand him because they don't have a correct relationship. So they're going to think of him and his desires erroneously. They're going to have it wrong. But they're thinking they're doing his service. But if they had known him correctly, they had a relationship with him correctly, they never would have done that. They would have repented of their stuff and gone and made sure they could covenant. Make the effort to go covenant. But I've said these words to you so that when the hour comes, you remember that I told them to you. And these I did not say to you at the beginning, for I was with you. So, this is the whole thing, is that he's about to leave. He said, but I want you to remember them. And thankfully, they got written down so we can read them and remember them. Okay? So this, I'm going to end it here, and we're going to be a little bit shorter today because I want to then continue 16 into 17. So it'll be a little bit quicker today, but we'll have time for the Q&A. So I want to stop here. But I just want us to remember, okay, that he's doing all of this so that we should not stumble, so we have no fear, so that we can have the peace that he talks about in chapter 14 and verse 27, the peace that he says, I leave with you and my peace I give to you. And it's not just the comforter of the helper that's supposed to give you the peace. It's understanding all the relational stuff should bring the peace. Amen? Amen. Let's pray. Father, we come before you, and we are very blessed that we have your words written down for us. We're very blessed that they were documented for us and there for us to receive so that we can understand your relationship with Yeshua, his relationship with you, the disciples' relationships with him and therefore also with you, so that we can learn to imitate all that down the line, so that we can then also imitate and be in the same relationship with all of you. So, Father, we come before you now asking that you would help us to be humble, that we would lay down our lives so that we would receive the life of Yeshua in us, that we get off the self-sovereign throne, and that we would recognize that we need to appreciate the relationship that you give us and all the blessings, and that if we would just guard your commands and stay in your love, all that we need would be provided for us. And so, Father, we want to thank you. We want to praise you. And we want to do all that we do and ask all that we ask, as stated here in John 17, by doing it in the name and authority of Yeshua our Messiah. And then together we can say, Amen, Amen, Amen.